Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into the Garden of Doom, and this week our guest hails from Riga, Latvia. Am I right about that? Riga, Latvia?
Correct, yes.
Excellent.
Greetings, listeners of the Garden of Doom. I mean, greetings, comrades.
If you don't recognize that voice, this is the host of the Eastern Border. Now, he doesn't say his name on his show, but we have it here because this is the Garden of Doom and we extract information. He is Kristaps Andrejsons, if I said that even close to correctly. Basically, it's Christopher Anderson to us anglicized peoples. And we're going to call him Chris from now on because that's easy and, I like that. He's going to tell you more about his show than I ever possibly could. And I have to be honest, I don't know how I stumbled upon it, but I listen to a lot of history podcasts, and I'm sure that that's the way. But his show is a very interesting mix of news, current events, politics, but also sort of like historical events. And he also has like a series where he goes over specific weaponry. I think that's really what his passion would be. But I think events keep overtaking him reviewing like tanks and submarines, and he's forced to go into politics and things like that. But we welcome in Chris from the Eastern Border. Definitely check out his show, subscribe. There's a whole world of fascinating history podcasts from different parts of the world, and his is current. And I think I think that's critically important for people to form informed opinions about the world, to hear some sort of on the front line news, not just what we hear here on CNN or Fox or whatever it is that the Wall Street Journal and NPR, whatever you listen, even BBC. So anyway, so we're going to start with Chris telling you a little bit about his show and maybe giving you a little bit of information on the current situation that's going on there, some serious stuff, so to speak. And then we're going to go into Russian lore, traditions. I learned there's Russian Annunaki. I shared with him some information. He shared with me some information. And then he went into some deep dives. So really looking forward to this show. And we're going to be on the heels of this a few weeks later. We're going to drop the show with Vladimir Wiedemann, who's Estonian, though he lives in London now. So there'll be a little bit more of that coming, but I can tell you they're very different shows indeed. So without further ado, Chris, welcome into the Garden of Doom, and thank you. How are you today?
Greetings. I'm awesome. And yeah, you don't have that super thick Russian accent on all the time. But yeah, I do the Eastern Border show. And thank you for having me on here on Garden of Doom. Awesome name for a show, by the way. Just loving it.
Thank you.
But yeah, my show, well, it started out as a history show originally. But then I found out that, yeah, a lot of people in my part of the world, well, a lot of them don't know English at all. So a lot of things that are mentioned either in Latvian or in Russian about all our region just never make it to the West. And when they do, they're basically by press releases, and they're kind of late, and they tend to be, kind of not completely accurate. So now I try to do once a month political episode where I look at some current events and things that I know that probably won't go into the mainstream news outlets, because some of this stuff is like really weird. Like how recently in Siberia, the Siberian Academy of Sciences kind of pushed down their decisions and their findings about how polluted the industrial cities of Russia actually are, so as to not hurt Putin's party, United Russian elections. And you don't hear about that stuff often, so I try to bring that out. Of course, I do the historical episodes, and well, lately I've been doing all this weapon stuff. My latest episode was the Soviet history of computing, where I looked together with my friend Arets. I looked at how the Soviet Union built their own computers and how it all went, and that was done because I like another show, Advent of Computing, and well, we had a conversation about this with him, and well, that was the latest episode. But I also kind of like to do what you would call people's history, because I do all these Soviet era, not just equipment, not all these historical fact stuff. I also just go out, as I'm a journalist too, and then I've done some reporting, like from war in Donbass and stuff. But I just tend to go out and ask people how it was really like to live in the USSR and get their own stories and their little weird personal stuff. And well, that goes in because, you have to ask what was the experience of everyday life and what the people actually thought. All this stuff that doesn't really get into history books. It's a bit varied, but I guess everyone can find something that they like here, and I'm really happy that you found my show. So
yeah,
must be doing something right.
Hey, yeah, and the variety is great. I have a couple of sort of current event questions for you, and I don't know if you know the answers or not. But I saw an article, I don't know how long, probably, but within the last probably 6 months, give or take, and that was that Chernobyl was heating up again. Is there any follow-up or any details on that? It's like the story came out, everybody was worried, and then it went away.
Well, they kind of recently-ish finished upbuilding their new cover system over it, because they had to replace all the old Soviet one, and they have finally covered, in concrete. It's kind of a dome thing over the main housing unit, and it seemed that the measurements of temperature were kind of getting something weird was happening there. But yeah, then it kind of got, people decided that it's a military matter, and now, we don't have any other new news, because the Ukrainian government is just putting tabs on it, and I hope they're doing fine. But I have heard of this, and everyone got worried, but we don't have any new recent kind of comments on what's going on there. Sadly, I don't know. If something will come up, then I'll definitely mention that on my show, because that'd be huge.
Yeah.
However, I think that it might be bad, it might be good, but I hope that they've settled this issue.
Yeah.
Talking about Chernobyl, by the way,
yeah.
You can apparently legally purchase farms in the exclusion zone. You have to sign the paper that anything you grow there that you won't sell and to anyone else because it's still radioactive there. But you can buy a house there for about $1,000. And there are houses with electricity and running water. You have to do some renovations. But if you really want to escape to a place where no one else will go, and then do some farming there, then it's about $1,000 to get a couple of acres there if you want to.
So for our vampires in the audience or other immortal beings, if you want to get some cheap real estate that'll be very livable within about 10,000 years or so, there you go. There it is, and probably going to be one of the latest victims of global flooding because it's pretty much pretty well inland. So there you go. Some Chernobyl. I guess they poured some fresh concrete over it, and so we're not measuring the heat doesn't mean that the heat isn't rising. It just means that nobody's measuring it. So I guess it's sort of like the caldera in Montana. We'll see about that. The other thing, this must have been a year, maybe even 2 ago, that something blew up. Something nuclear blew up, like in the north of Russia, not Vladivostok, but further west.
Archangel, yes.
Yes. So what's that all about, and what's the status?
Well, if you remember, this was after Vladimir Putin's new experimental weapons show, because, he stated in a press conference, I guess it was in 2018, that Russia is building new weapons systems, and they wanted to build some nuclear-powered rockets. And, to show how effective they would be in the future, he showed a nice little graph where he pointed that their new nuclear-powered cruise missiles could strike Florida, which is fun. But everyone didn't take it in stride. So what they did there was that they tried to make nuclear material, and they tried to make this rocket. And their first test flight, the rocket exploded, killing a bunch of engineers and people working around it. And then they had issues with the radiation coming in the air from the other facility where they tried to make the fuel for it. And it was also based on an old abandoned United States project, because the United States had a project of a rocket that basically works off of nuclear power. But the problem is that if you shoot that rocket over anything, then it leaves a nice little trail of radioactivity behind it. So it's kind of a pointless weapon in a way. That's why the United States abandoned it. But Mr. Putin decided that it might be a nice time to maybe upgrade on this version. Create a cruise missile powered by nuclear force that wouldn't just spray pollution out of its exhausts. But that failed. So that felt pretty bad.
And see, on this show, I like to say I've got something for everybody. For those of you who are proud capitalists, I mean, look at Elon Musk and SpaceX and Branson and Bezos. They had a lot of rockets that exploded and nobody died and no radiation trailing. So, hey, capitalism works there in that example. For those of you who want to blame America first, hey, America came up with this idea first, or at least in some practice. We abandoned it, but we came up with it first, and so maybe it is our fault. So there you go, something for everybody. You have told me that you are in Riga, Latvia, and for the sake of the audience, where is Latvia? And you were saying that there's a current crisis involving Belarusian, is it Belarusian or Belarusian refugees? And maybe if you could touch on that a little bit. And then I promise the audience we're going to get into the mythology and monsters and stuff that we love to cover here.
Well, normally I live about 30 kilometers, it was like 20 miles from the Russian border, in a small border town called Ludza. And everyone there works in border guard, basically. Mm-hmm. We also see a lot of United States soldiers and other NATO soldiers too, because, well, where would you put all the tanks? So obviously. Sure. However, recently, in the last month or so, Latvia and Estonia are getting a bunch of refugees from both Belarus and, strangely enough, from Iraq, because Iraq is one of the few countries after the whole debacle with Lukashenko's stuff. A lot of people from there try to come to EU, and they decided that it's easy to kind of go to Belarus, which is not an EU, and then because we didn't have any issues with them, so the border isn't heavily guarded, it's just basically forest, and they try to sneak in. And then Belarusian people who were, reasonably uppity and angry about what Lukashenko is doing himself, they're also interested in, escaping to EU and then asking for asylum or something.
Lukashenko is the dictator of Belarus, is it, just for clarification?
Yes, the quite possibly the craziest one on our end of the planet. I mean, say what you want about Putin, but at least he's not dumb. Lukashenko is just doing crazy things because about the plane incident, for example. He completely falsified his own elections and everything, and then a lot of people legally try to, escape the country because we have a lot of these anonymized messengers. One of them is Telegram, where you also can have a channel where you post news. And a Belarusian opposition guy was flying from, I guess it was from Greece to Lithuania, and he flew over Belarusian airspace, and there was unrelated flight there, and he was one of the leaders of the kind of the Belarusian opposition journalism. And when they were flying over Belarusian airspace, Lukashenko literally raised up his MiG fighter jet in the sky and threatened to blow up the passenger plane if it wouldn't make an emergency landing in Minsk, where this journalist got arrested promptly. That caused after the fact that he's also used water cannons on elderly people who just went out to protest his regime. You can look up, it's a sad photo and stuff. Yeah, what's happening is what we're really scared of, since any disorderly stuff over there in Belarus or in Russia means that, yeah, we might get a lot of refugees, and we really don't know how to handle them properly. And also, well, there's been a lot of election meddling from that side to ours, because everyone here also speaks Russian and stuff. So even if we would want to take all of them in, we would still have to give them all a background check, because the chances of, say, secret FSB, secret police agents coming in via these refugees is, well, very high. And it's kind of, and it's a matter of kind of EU security as well, because if you let them in as refugees, then, well, they can just travel around the EU and just move to any other country. Right. So this process needs to exist, because if you allow, well, the odds are quite large that there might not be just sad refugees, but someone other, so to speak.
Right.
So that's happening, and we have a state of emergency, and everyone's very uppity in the border regions right now, next to the Belarusian border.
Right. It's sort of the same fear we have on our own southern border, that of every 1,000 refugees that or migrants or immigrants, whatever term you want to put there, that there's in there, there's going to be some element of criminals, or there's going to be some coyotes in there, some people who are going to go into the drug trade or whatever. It's easy to embed people in the refugees, and that's just reality. But we know that overwhelming percentage are just people trying to flee something dangerous or find a better life, or some combination of both. Are you guys afraid or worried at all about getting refugees in from Afghanistan now, or is it just too far? There's too many borders to cross.
We got, I think, when the refugee from Afghanistan, we have taken in some translators who helped our military forces when they were serving in Afghanistan as well, because we're a NATO country. And some of them have opted to come to Latvia now, which we are taking in. But previously, when the refugee crisis in Syria happened, Latvia is super far up north. Riga is on about the same latitude as Anchorage, Alaska. We're really far north.
Right.
So when the EU stated that we should take in refugees, which we really haven't had any, because we're in a peaceful corner of the planet usually, we just don't get them that much. Out of the 722, I know, what a large number, but still, we had to take in 722 Syrian refugees, out of whom 1 year later, only a single one has stayed here. Because, like I said, you can't really control their movement. So we built facilities for them. We had everything set up. One of them who was a neurosurgeon, decided to acquire Latvian citizenship and start doing things here. Everyone else you can't control where they move. They probably moved to, say, Sweden or Germany or someplace else. So we just lack the experience of having to deal with refugees at all. And our government, surprise, surprise, is also not among the most competent, so to speak.
It's also cold there, and probably someone from Syria or Iraq, well, they're used to 4 seasons. They're not used to that kind of cold. So maybe they just want to go someplace that's a little bit warmer.
Yeah, our summers are short and quite colder than everything that people farther south have been gotten used to. The standard temperatures are, I don't know exactly how to convert to Fahrenheit. Let me look this up, because I know the 30s in Celsius is like... it should be about... Okay, so the hottest it got this year, and this year is like the craziest stuff. It got to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and everyone was melting. That's abnormally hot, 90 degrees.
Yeah, which is hot anywhere, but it's not hot. I mean, that's sort of an average day here in Baltimore.
No one here has air conditioning. We don't need it normally.
Right.
Because our standard summer is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the peak. Standard peak is 75. It got to 90. We were scared, and that's how Latvians start to melt. We have these 75 degrees Fahrenheit for about 2 weeks, and then it's colder than that. So
you're basically a country of snowmen. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. It is quite cold here now, then, but it's not as like it differs from the Canadian one because we're also next to an insular sea, so it's kind of more moist, I suppose, here in the Baltics because everywhere is like super swampy, so it kind of gets you in there. We have a lot of rain, but yeah, it's cold and rainy and snowy for about 6-7 months per year, and 9 months of the year are just hardcore rainy season.
So hear me out, Kristaps. Chris, your new business partner, by the way, because I have a way to make us rich. What we need to do is we need to get some wild game and some domesticated animals and put some fields together, acquire these 722 lodgings, keep about half of them for lodgings, make the others like sort of like dude ranch kind of stuff, and open up a tourist site for like a northern dude ranch where there's like reindeer and musk oxen and yak riding and you know you can view wild wolves, hunting and things like that.
I ought to disappoint you. We have those a lot here. We also are. A lot of people have tried to clone and recreate the ancient Taurus cows, the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
They do that as well. And because Latvia is 59% forest.
The oryx, the old oryx ox.
Yeah, they're trying to make this. Yeah, the oryx ones. Latvia is, like I said, 59% forest. We're super forested. I don't know.
Like most of my business ideas, somebody's already done it. Oh, well. All right, well.
But it sounds good. It sounds good, really. And land prices, as far as I know, are cheaper than, well, you are in the States somewhere, I presume.
Plan B. Same thing, except around Chernobyl. So, anyway.
That could work. That could work. Oh, wow.
Radioactive beasts will have like moose with 4 eyes and wings. It'll be awesome. Don't worry. I'll send you a business plan. We're this digression is even. This is getting me out of the Garden of Doom and straight into the swamp.
Come see the Mothman.
Exactly
it's
right.
Totally
You're on board. You're on board. There we go. All right. So let's get to the main topic of our show or topics. So tell us some of the Eastern world. I'm just going to say Russian just for shorthand, and I really don't want to offend anyone. I know there's but if I say Eastern world, that could be Middle Eastern, that could be Far Eastern. This is probably a mostly Eurocentric show, though I know I have listeners in places that are in other parts of the world as well. But let's go. I mean, should I say Slavic? Is that better? But I mean, 3/4 of Russia isn't Slavic.
Yeah, see, if you want to kind of describe everything, like Eastern Europe plus Russia, just say Soviet sphere. That works. That includes the Balkans as well, in a way, because they have their own Tito stuff. But people understand. That's why I just say post-Soviet sphere. That works. But namely, well, Slavs are. Yeah, we're not Slavs here in Latvia either, or Baltic peoples, us and Lithuanians. And then the Estonians, they're kind of like Finnish and Hungarian. They're related. It's Finno-Ugric people. And then everywhere else you see Slavs, and then there's all the Tatars in Russia. But all the myths and everything, because how the Soviet Union operated, yeah, there's a lot of overlap and living next to each other, because we were still pagans up until the 12th century, basically, when the Teutonic Knights came. We had a nice little crusade declared against us. And all these myths and legends, they tie into each other. They are, you can see a lot of similarities between all of them.
Who doesn't like a good crusade being launched against them? And the Teutonic Knights were from Germany, right?
Yeah, well, the higher ups were. The boots on the ground were mostly Swedish because the Pope decided to look at the map and decided that our little forest in the middle of nowhere, well, we weren't tied into the larger world yet at that point, which is kind of interesting because, like, the river Daugava that runs through Latvia is the starting point from which the Swedish people and everyone from here went down to Constantinople to become the Varangian Guards. Mm-hmm. Because it and Dnieper River, or I'm not mistaken about the one on the other end, basically they start at the same mountain range. They just, basically float to different directions.
The Caucasus, right?
No, it's not in the Caucasus. It's the Altai Mountains, but it's great. So they just traveled through this. But yeah, it was fun. But the mythology, well, depends on. Our pagan gods are quite similar to Nordic gods, which are quite similar to Slavic gods, and they're all quite weird. We did have a lot of witch veneration here, by the way. At least here in the Baltics, we liked our snake women, so to speak.
Okay, well, let's start with the gods. Let's start with the pagan pantheon, the names and who they equate to, and then we can get into certainly we're going to get into witches. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'll start speaking about mostly old Slavic beliefs, because that a lot of people will understand all this more. See, old Slavic gods are basically, you take all the Scandinavian gods and tile their names up and put in new ones. Big issue here. I'm talking about proper names. Slavic tradition didn't really use a lot of writing as such, the old Slavic one, so they had their own versions of runestones, and various rituals and stuff. But oh boy, wait a second. I need to 10-second break. Sorry, I'll redo this.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it is. Yep, it's going. All right, very good.
See, about Slavic gods, they are kind of like all these old Norse gods, but you change the names and add some different stuff there. The problem here is that, well, all of our sources, much of what we know, comes from two literally sources, basically the Novgorod Chronicle as well as the Primary Chronicle, which dealt with the beliefs of the Kievan Rus, the Russians before even Moscow was set up. And we don't have any writings of Slavic prayers or myths at all. And the only thing that we do know of their religion is known from Christian chroniclers. Of course, in these days, same as with Wicca and neo-paganism in the Western world, there's also a lot of people who study their ethnography and everything to kind of restore this whole stuff. And what's interesting is that a lot of these things that you can see probably about the old Slavic gods or all this area, well, unlike in Scandinavia, where you can quite accurately recreate the whole experience, here it's a bit more difficult because a lot of the stuff is kind of modern interpretation of the subject. But what we do know, for example, is the fact that we have Perun. Perun is literally the god of thunder. It's just like Thor, except he's also more like Thor and Odin combined. And it's interesting because, for one, well, his name is very similar to how we Latvians call thunder in general, but it's a bit different for Russian. But he also has a sacred oak tree, who's the home of all beings. The top branch is the heavens, the trunk and lower branches are the realms of man, and the roots were the underworld.
Yeah, so like Yggdrasil.
Basically, yeah. And he was always honored with temples and all the shrines, and a lot of, the higher you can go, the better. Mountaintops and, well, in the forest with oak trees. Oak trees are basically the universal holy grove tree thing ever.
Why not?
And then, well, we have interesting thing. We have Jbog, or Dajbog. He's kind of fun because in these Slavic beliefs, they are kind of, they're the opposite. A god has multiple elements of things happening with him. Because Dajbog is both the fire god and the rain god. It's interesting. His name loosely translates in Russian to the giving god. See, he gives life to the crops in the fields with rain, symbolizes bounty and abundance. But he's also the fire god because of this giving aspect, because he's the patron of the hearth fire. And offerings were basically given to him so that, winter, major issue here. You have to kind of survive through the winter. So keeping the hearth warm was super important. So that's why you kind of wanted to appease this guy.
For sure. And also cooked food is better.
Optional,
meat. Cooked meat.
Capitalist needs cooked food.
See, yes.
Obviously, yes, you're right. Also, then we have a nice little shape-shifting god Veles, and it's interesting because he is the arch enemy of Perun. He's the storm god. Thunder god, storm god, two different things. He's also the serpent god, and he always slithers up the sacred tree towards where Perun lives. And he's kind of a trickster deity, and he's the magic and sorcery god. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, so he's sort of like Loki plus.
Loki plus, yes.
Plus.
And then we get to the fun god that you probably know. Well, he's an opposite either. There are two gods that literally would translate to the white god and to the black god. One is Belobog, the god of light, and Chernobog, the god of darkness, which are also the same god, sort of.
So it's like that guy from Star Trek, except only one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, at least, because my Star Trek knowledge is very, very low, because all I've seen are some, like, I've seen some of the movies, probably not the good ones, and I've seen some of the new series, but I've yet to dig into the old ones. It's weird.
Well, for the European and American Garden of the Doom listeners, there was an episode of Star Trek, the original series, with Frank Gorshin, who played the Riddler in the Adam West Batman. And he was half black, half white. I mean, literally the color black, the color white, painted on his face. And then there was somebody who, the other hemispheres of his body were opposite black and white. And obviously it was a play on the absurdity of racism. Because nobody else could really tell any difference. They thought they were the same person, but to them they were extremely different because one of them, their right side was black, the other one, their left side was black, etc. Anyway, so that's just the image that I took from it. But again, not particularly important to this exposition.
See, this is the thing. This Chernobog or Belobog, mostly known by Chernobog because this was all written by Christians, and Chernobog, together with our previous guy, Veles, they're symbols for various demons and devils. Like, even our name for Christian devil is the old name for Veles, or Latvian in Baltic beliefs it was Valmus, or Valns. That's literally our name for devil. So, but Chernobog is mostly known because he's the god of darkness. He's also the god of decay, misfortune, death, and, well, everything bad can happen to you. He's not the trickster god, he's, well, the god of doom. Also, I had to be on this show because, for one, my favorite superhero is Dr. Doom.
Sure.
Just saying.
Right.
Because people tend to mistake Latvia for Latvia, and then fun times can be had.
Of course. It's just like I'm sure Sokovia is I'm sure the people in Slovakia are really excited about Sokovia.
You will like the next one. You actually, this is the name of the god that you have heard a lot of times. Probably, definitely. Her name is Lada.
Okay.
The goddess of love and beauty.
Ah.
The problem is that if you've seen Lada cards, then you know that, you won't see much love for them. They're cheap and they're not particularly beautiful, but that's why they're named that way. She's a patron of weddings.
Oh.
And called upon to bless newly married couples. And she has a twin brother, Lovedal, but he's kind of a minor one. And she's kind of similar to Freya in a bit because she's her association of everything. And she's also ties in with death because of death and childbirth specifically. Ooh. And that's kind of interesting because a lot of these goddesses are, well, and then they have the good aspect and then death. Yeah, niceness and still death. And we also have Marzanna, the goddess of winter and death. Nice.
A lot of sharing of death.
Latvia is not a very happy place. Russia is also not a very happy place. We're often cited as being amongst the saddest people in the world. We're also extremely introverted and kind of an outlier in this matter because we had a running joke here that when the pandemic hit and you were told to socially distance yourself with kind of this, I think it was 6 feet, and US here it was 2 meters, about the same length. Mm-hmm. And then it was like 2 meters. Wow, it's closer than usual. We're gonna have to back in. But and Marzanna, basically, she is also Lada, because when the winter comes, as the soil goes cold and the crops die, basically she dies. like Marzanda dies and she's this death goddess, and she's then reborn in the spring as Lada, and then Lada dies and Marzanda dies, and it's all crazy. Then we have Mokosh, the fertility goddess, another one, and she specifically is associated with the good kind of childbirth thing, and it's a weird thing. She's the bit of a naughty fertility goddess.
Oh.
And she also is often portrayed by holding a penis in each hand, because the goddess of fertility, she's the overseer or male potency or the lack thereof.
So she's holding it gently. She's not in a threatening manner.
No, she can threaten you if you do bad things. So
So she's like both sides of Lorena Bobbitt. You probably don't know. Oh, you know who that is? Okay. All right. I'm going to leave that one alone. All right. So she can give and she can take away.
Of course. Then we also have the father of Chbog. We have our own Svarog, which is a solar god, who's kind of the Greek. I guess Greek Hephaestus is closest thing, because he's a god of sun and fire, but he's the fire god of the forge, of the smithcraft.
Oh, so okay, so yeah, Hephaestus or Vulcan, as maybe some people know, but yeah.
And he's also the demiurge of the Slavic faiths. Of the Russian Slavic faiths, at least, because I'm not an expert on what the Western Slavic people would believe in, because I don't read Czech or Polish, sadly, but I can read Ukrainian and Russian, so easier for me. He's also the guy who creates the world, because he's the smith guy. And in some traditions, he's formed and blended together with Perun, or our thunder god, to form an all-powerful father god. And sometimes it isn't. Again, it's we have all these variations and vague information because, again, lack of primary sources and a lot of attempts in, late Tsarist Empire era to romanticize such things and figure stuff out. It's weird.
Well, that's interesting because, isn't Odin in German Volten?
Yes.
And what you just described with these different gods forming together to be the one all-powerful god sounds like Voltron from anime.
Well, you have to understand that the first kings of Russia were the Ruriks, who were basically Swedish Vikings. So that also might kind of explain a few things. And then there's the last one.
What were they called? What was the name of the Swedish rulers?
The family was Rurikovich, the Ruriks, and we call them Varyags here. Varyags are the Vikings who went, on the eastern parts. If they went to Britain, Vikings. They came to our parts, Varyags.
Okay, I've never heard that word before. Actually, there's a lot of things I haven't heard, which is exactly why you're on this show, and you're perfect. This is great.
Okay, and then we have the last one, which is basically Venus, because Zoria, the goddess of dusk and dawn, she represents obviously the morning star and the evening star, which, as we now know, is Venus. But, astronomy was not that strong of an aspect here, because the nights aren't that clear that often here. In these parts, we have a lot of, obviously, rain and so clouds. But we have these, and she's like everything else is found with two or sometimes three different aspects. And we have Zoya Utenne, or the morning Zoya, and then we have the evening Zoya. And according to legend, she's the one that opens the gates of heaven every morning and lets out the other gods. And she's like, go on your daily duties. And then at the end of the day, she closes the gods so that dusk can take place and everything. Oh, in the midnight, of course, she dies with the sun. And in the morning, she's reborn and awakens all the time. Because, of course, every possible god has to be associated with dying somehow.
Sure.
We're kind of obsessed with all this dying stuff.
Good. Well, it's about the only guarantee, so there you go.
So this is a basic short introduction, and pagan gods as well. We have something similar. One god that really differs from the Baltic pantheon to the Slavic one is that we have a very specific ancient goddess, mostly Lithuanian goddess, called Medena, who's the goddess of the forest, and she's often depicted as a naked lady riding on a bear.
Sure, of course.
We like that part.
Yeah.
She's the goddess of fertility, and if you worship her properly, she'll send you bountiful game in the forest. If you anger her, she'll send you snakes that'll poison you and make you get lost in the forest, because forest also can be dark and scary. And in a lot of modern mythology takes on it, for some reason, she, together with the shapeshifter god, and sometimes even Chernobog is mostly like fiery devil god. But people who are Lovecraftian fans, they like to portray this dark side of Medina and the shape-shifting serpent Velis as some sort of Lovecraftian eldritch abomination entities for no reasons. A lot of people like to draw them that way, so it's kind of strange.
Well, why not? It's fun. I mean, they're doing the same thing basically I do, is drawing parallels and probably ones that are false, like Volton to Voltron. So, you know.
Yeah, but I think I might be right. Okay, give me literally 30 seconds off now. I have to check the door so that I don't get interrupted later on.
You got it. I'm going to hit pause again. No problem. And we are back. So, all right, we had Chris had to take a small break just to take care of the monster that lives in his house, and that is a cat, because I don't know who else lives in this home, so I don't want to get him into trouble. But a regular cat with 4 legs, a tail, and all that other good stuff. Mostly, yeah. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. So we have covered most of the Pantheon, or have we finished the Pantheon?
Well, we've covered the stuff that at least we know mostly about. There were a lot of smaller gods. There was a kind of... This is kind of interesting because we had this tradition here, also in the Baltics and in Russia throughout, that there's also all sorts of monsters and everything, but these are kind of the biggest major deities. However, there's also all the ancestral stuff, because when the autumn kind of gives way, like in the very coldest parts of the autumn, there would be a lot of ancestral cult worship thing going on, where you would basically go out and in your kind of storage barn where you would store all your foods for the winter, you'd set up a small table and put white cloth on it, and kind of the elder of the elder of the household, the guy who runs the farm, so to speak, had to spend a night every week for a month in October, just sitting there all night long, absorbing the wisdom of the ancestors who were said that they would come and visit. And that was, in modern terms, somewhere from mid-October to mid-November. We could shift around a bit, but yeah, that's an interesting thing. And then we also have like all sorts of monsters and things that people believed existed, and those mostly come through various traditional folktales. Because, like I said, I'm trying to find primary sources for all of that. Yeah, a bit hard when all you've got to go is on, like, when all your sources are basically oral tradition anyways. Yeah, that's a bit strange.
Yeah, and yeah, that's not totally unusual. Oral histories is a lot of what Norse was, and that got transcribed later on. And of course, a lot of First Nations, maybe all the First Nations, are mostly oral history. So yeah, that's sort of a recurrent challenge of things. So you mentioned something about monsters and stuff like that, but I wanted to, before we get on that, because I'm old and I don't want to forget what my thought was. Obviously most of the post-Soviet sphere is some sort of Orthodox church, whether it's Russian Orthodox or whatever, some Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. What is the interpretation there of things like the angels and the archangels? Is it similar to Catholic? Is it completely different?
Okay, so it's a bit more complicated than that. See, we have a lot of, like, Riga is the capital of Latvia, which is western parts of previous Soviet Union. See, we are kind of split because Estonia and Latvia, we even though we were in the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union, we were basically all very Germanized because, well, German nobility stayed in power even after Peter the Great conquered all this territory. So we have a lot of Lutherans here. Lutherans are the largest Protestant denomination, and it's about, like, of all the Latvian Christians, I'd say it's about, 40%. Then we have a lot of Catholics because the southern parts of Latvia and all of Lithuania and Poland were extremely Catholic.
Yeah, so was Lithuania and Sweden, which you said had a lot of influence. So yeah.
Yeah, so Sweden, top half of Latvia, Poland, kind of bottom half, and then from the east, the Orthodoxy came in. So it's weird because right now we have about a more or less equal mix of Catholics, Lutherans, and Orthodox, and everyone's super friendly here. Like, they called ecumenical masses at Christmas. I haven't really seen anyone, being hostile because of their religion. That, again, is also because, due to how the Soviet era treated religion in general, is that people just tend to keep it as a very private matter. Evangelizing is kind of not a thing here, because we find that, going house to house and talking to people openly, that's something that we don't do. So Mormons have a hard time in Latvia, and they are here, but, it's cold, and people look at you strange if you talk to someone else on the street. But they're nice. But they're nice folks. Like, we're not mean. We're just not used to communicating ever.
Right.
Which also stunned me when I visited the United States. When people just in random lines in stores ask you questions, and then when they saw my passport when I went to buy myself a beer, then when they asked me, "How did you get here?" and I was surprised because someone actually wanted to hear the answer. That was the biggest culture shock moment.
Right, you were worried that they were actually Secret Service or something, like, show me your papers.
No, they do ask for papers here in Latvia as well. It's just that we're not used to people saying, like, thank you and have a nice day at the cashier stop, and no one talks to each other at lines. Eye contact is considered rude even. And holding hands is something you probably shouldn't do in public, so we're kind of like the Finnish people there. We're very introverted. But that's how, different cultures, I suppose. But about the angel stuff, see, it's weird in the Orthodox Church because they have a massive cult of saints, and they also have a lot of relics. And the Russian Orthodox Church is the Great Patriarchate of Moscow, and they claim to be kind of the Russian government considers Moscow to be the third Rome, basically. That's their ideal build, because due to how they married into Byzantine Empire when it was still there, and their rulers got there, and then a lot of complicated stuff happened. But the mysticism part really is more on all the actions that people do, and they have their own rituals. The angels are, in a way, less important because you have saints. It's very, very saint organized. You would have your St. Andrews and St. George's and all that stuff, and they take the role of kind of those guardians around specific areas and stuff. And angels are, well, obviously they're divinely inspired beings, according to Orthodoxy, and they also, well, the stories that we have about them, for example, is that they appear kind of like Catholic ones. And the biggest story is about St. Kirill and St. Methodius, and they're saints in the Russian Orthodox Church because they literally put together the Cyrillic, or the Russian alphabet, that is. Because at that time it was believed that each empire needed its own alphabet. So Bulgarians adopted Cyrillic too later on, but Kiev and Rus and everyone basically just adopted that through Cyril and Methody, which is kind of interesting. But angels are, well, they kind of take in a weird position because, well, the role is kind of taken over by saints, which are depicted as being very angel-y. We don't have, at least Orthodox, I haven't seen a lot of, in their theology at least, I haven't seen a lot of depictions of, they look pretty standard. They're cherubim, and, all these rings within rings and all these 8 levels. I don't think they play in kind of a very huge importance in the Orthodox theology, sadly. They have their own thing with the saints, however, and that's where we get into the creepy stuff. Because, in Russia, they still have this show, and it started out as something which was vaguely experimental and plausible. It was called the Battle of the Psychics. So
the Battle of the what?
Of the Psychics.
Oh, psychics.
Imagine a talent show, except it's for people with psychic powers, or so they claim.
Yeah, no, I'm listening.
And then, at least at the beginning, they had a guy who was a professional stage magician, and he would build all sorts of riddles for them and test them out, and then they would kind of compete, and judges would rate them. And they had people who could channel these saints and get their powers. Then you also had weird shamans because shamanism and the Tengri stuff all alive in the Far East. The ethnic Russians are, they basically live in the European part of Russia. mostly. They're not traditionally in say, Vladivostok. Vladivostok is, at this point, I guess, majority Chinese even might be. Everything around Baikal region definitely is. But they would gather all these people. After that, the psychic show got turned into a bit of a farce because they obviously started doing, whatever ancient aliens are doing in the so-called History Channel now, and just dragging everything. But it was pretty good at the beginning. So all these angel stuff, I don't know. I really didn't see anyone on the psychic show channeling angels specifically.
Well, it's smart. It's smart to sort of humanize them into the saints.
I think so. It's kind of united because, for example, Saint George is kind of tied together with Archangel Michael, thing like that. That's again, it's a bit of a mess because let's just say my old church Slavonic isn't that great, and reading that stuff really requires you to be able to study and read old church Slavonic, and it takes a bit of an effort. It's totally different from if your listeners think that those weird Russian letters look weird and strange, tell them to Google up Old Church Slavonic and try to at least find something recognizable there.
You just did. You just told them to do it. All right, so we'll get off of the angel thing because, obviously for the reasons that you stated. So let's get into the monsters and the boogeymen. And there's only one that I know of, and that is sort of like a combination of a witch and a boogie person, and that's Baba Yaga.
Oh. Well, she's she's an ancient swamp witch, basically. It's she's not exactly human. She's kind of you'd call I guess you'd call her a female ogre, I suppose, but not quite, because those things are weird. Which reminds me, by the way, we have a city in Latvia called Ogra, spelled literally ogre, and in Latvian, obviously, this doesn't mean anything. But in the 70s, it was a very popular tourist destination because every city had their Memorial Day, like 110th anniversary of it being founded. And obviously, during the Soviet era, they printed out Lenin's memorial pins, because even if your city is celebrating something, you have to put Lenin's face on it. So the most popular thing for Western tourists was to buy these Ogra pins with Lenin's face on them. Like it's like Lenin and ogre written under it.
Right.
It's fun. It's a fun one. But yeah, Baba Yaga, the accents are,
it's okay. You use the proper accent. That's awesome.
Kidnaps kids and cooks and eats them.
Cool.
Also,
I mean, not cool.
What?
I mean, not cool. Not cool at all.
No, it's cool. I mean, she also is depicted often as living in a house with a kind of this chicken leg at the base of the house, because her house can jump around because it stands often on this foot of a chicken, and that's so ingrained that when you even when you read the Brothers Grimm or other fairy tales, more popular ones, as they got translated in Latin and Russian, they often got represented like the witch, and those stories got represented as living in such a house. It's kind of interesting.
Like Hansel and Gretel.
Like basically something of that sort. Yeah, and she also, with this, she also kind of guards the fountain of life. The water of life thing. So she guards the secrets of immortality also, besides being a harsh cannibal. And she's also quite metal because she has a fence that is topped with human skulls.
Ooh, goth.
Pretty much. And, she also can fly through the air, just like Western witches. But, broomsticks, not so much fun. She either uses an iron kettle as her mode of transportation, or in a mortar that she drives through the air with a pestle.
What is a pestle?
Mortar and pestle, I don't know, the thingy.
Oh, like the launching tube.
No, the launching tube. The thing where you put in the spices and then you hammer it. She's using apothecaries.
Oh, the tools to actually, stabilize the mortar.
I guess it's weird. I don't know. It's the old one. And she often accompanies death. And she likes to devour newly released souls. It's a fun thing. And there's a lot of fairy tales where, we have a lot of these trickster guys who are often, I think every culture has them. It's kind of like, if I remember correctly, coyote and Native American legends. We have something similar here, where the youngest person in the household, he's the cunning guy, and he tricks her all the time. But she was seen as something that, if you go into the forest and get lost, then, it would be considered that she would eat you. She could get you and she would eat you, which is why we wouldn't want to get lost in the forest.
Sure. That's a big disincentive to walk around in the forest alone, or with people, or at all.
It's kind of and she also is like really old and really ugly, but also, again, like everything else, across all these tales, she sometimes shifts between actually helping this cunning character. She can be a cannibalistic villain. However, when someone needs to find the water of life, then they would go and they would do quests for her. Like, literally, she would send you to gather some weird thingies, and then she would basically just reward you as well. And she would sometimes give some weird advice too.
Well, like Circe the witch, if you pleased her, you may be her concubine for 2 years. I get it. Okay, so she can be bribed, or sometimes she's in a benevolent mood.
Yeah, she's just she's weird. She's a trickster also, and she's kind of very ambiguous. And she's also tied to this natural crone. And the thing is, she's viewed at the same time, she's venerated by witches of that ancient paganistic belief, because she represents the feminine side of the natural world, so to speak. She's technically as powerful as Perun, but she's not a god. She's kind of the wise crone figure. I mean, if you watch Game of Thrones, then I think she would be crone, except if crone was also a cannibal. It's a fundamentally weird way how to put it, but the best way how we can deal with this. Oh, talking about geography, this is a nice comparison so that your guests can understand a bit about our geography. So, Riga is kind of like Winterfell. Further up north, we have St. Petersburg, which is kind of like the wall. Then we have Stockholm, which is kind of like where the wildlings live, all over the wall. And Oslo in Norway and all that, then that's where the White Walkers live. So that you understand the verticality of the whole situation.
Okay, we're not comparing the peoples necessarily, just the geography.
No, the Norwegians are totally cool with being called the White Walkers. Fine.
Okay, all right, good. I don't know many, so all right, that's fine.
But yeah, she's kind of interesting because all this thing, well, in a weird way, if you know your Greek mythology, she also is kind of like Persephone in a philosophical sense, because Persephone was the goddess who was taken in by Hades, right? And she was the goddess of everything underground was Hades' domain, and she brought up the life from the soil too. And as we have a lot of swamps and forests and everything, she represents the kind of the dark forest, which is scary and can kill you. And back in olden days, well, we still have wild boars running around in Riga now and then. They got hit by an African swine plague or something, but we had huge issues when we have this nice little old town and they literally run it like wild boars running through downtown, perfectly normal. Sometimes people had to catch them. So it was all crazy and wild and dark. So, on one side she's super, super scary. And remember I told you about the Baltic Medina?
Sure. Yeah.
She's kind of a transformation of this Baba Yaga very often, because she can turn from this crone to this very beautiful lady, naked lady riding a bear, and the bear will maul you to death.
So if you see a woman riding a bear, first of all, don't be so sure that she is trying to tempt you with goodness. She might be trying to trick you, and either way, she's on a bear, which is always a precarious situation.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously bears are, for our region, something like eagles for the United States, I presume. Like, always you see on every Soviet depiction ever, Soviet Union is the bear country, and the United States is always the eagle country. It's kind of this thing. If you look at the meaning and importance of like a local symbolism. So the fact that she gets to be this crone who's a cannibal and supports witches, and at the same time kind of be this. She rides the bear, which is considered the strongest animal here in these parts. So it's a weird, interesting pagan duality again. And we don't have a lot of facts and everything again, because this whole thing comes from folk tales and oral tradition, and we don't have the documentation necessary to basically describe all the spears properly and all the rituals, because we don't know any rituals or any prayers to any of this.
So, well, she's a straw person. She fits into any version. Are there stark differences between, and I'm going to say this wrong, but let's just say the Asian clans or tribes or peoples in post-Soviet sphere? Do they have anything that's unique or different, or is it sort of the same themes, just different names?
Again, which one, really? Because, oh boy.
Well, let's go with the biggest. Let's go with the largest.
And the largest one would be the Tatar people, and they're literally what it says on the tin. They're mostly shamanistic, because Old Tengri, the religion of Genghis Khan, sort of ish. He might have been in ties with, say, Buddhists too. But in Asian parts, a lot of people are Buddhist. Then in the southern parts of modern-day Russia, we also had a lot of Muslim people. And it was weird because, there was even at one point, the Soviet Union in Abkhazia had its own black population there. They sadly have, as a commune, evaporated, but there were a period of actually black Russians, which you wouldn't expect, but it happened there. And they all had their own weird culture things. The largest Tatars are basically shamanistic with their spirits that I sadly don't know that much about. They also worship the open sky, and they have the sky gods, and that's a whole nother kind of worms.
It sounds like it's similar to the North and South American First Nations type of religions.
Yeah, quite a lot. And in fact, over here, at least in the Baltics, it was kind of shocking when I kind of realized that we have a lot in common with. Basically, I kind of sometimes feel that we, at least here in Latvia and Lithuania, we have more in common with your Native Americans than we do with the white settlers. I kind of feel it that way because, if you think about it, over here we had a crusade declare on this. We were conquered by a larger empire, and we still use our tribal names because, the areas where the tribes lived, and we use those tribal names to represent administrative divisions. We don't have states. We have the Kurland, Letigali, Semigali, all that stuff, all the tribal names. And it's kind of interesting and fascinating to look at this. So that such comparison would be nice. I hope I can. Well, it's a similar history-ish stuff because we were also in the role of getting colonized, basically. But that's the thing. But over there, I think, it's more like this traditional shamanist thing. If you know anything about Ainu people are very similar to traditional beliefs of the Far Eastern people because they traded. They are the Chukchi and the Evenks, which apparently are related to the indigenous Japanese Ainu people. After all, also Japan and Russia share a nice little border in the Kuril Islands, which Japan wants back and Russia doesn't want to give them. But it's all kind of in a big mix there. See, and one other thing is the fact that the Russian Orthodox Church, this neo-paganism and all these new studies, so it's really helped them a lot because during the Tsarist era, the Orthodox Church was extremely powerful, and they went out of their way to systematically eradicate all traces of pagan beliefs, specifically hunted them. However, Soviet Union claimed to be a fully atheist state. They had their own anti-religious propaganda. There was literally no freedom of religion in the sense that, you could get fined and persecuted for going to church. But within that era, however, they were also against nationalism as such, because Soviet Union tried to state that nationalism or patriotism or anything that's not the Soviet state is kind of very bad. So they tried to tie together because we had 16 different nations in the Soviet Union? A lot of them.
At least, yeah.
And they tried to tie them all together. So they actually studied ethnography and all that stuff, but they tried to show the common elements and use that for their own kind of character. So we have a lot of Soviet research from this, but that's also kind of tainted with the political slant. Because, well, in the Soviet Union, a lot of the actual science done had to be in line with Marxist-Leninist teachings. So you also kind of have to look very carefully through it. For example, when I studied for this episode, I looked at their views on pre-Christian era, all the kind of Russian peoples and everyone around them. And the fact is that in the Marxist theory, they represent the earliest mode, the feudal mode of kind of interrelations. Because Marxism goes through these various stages, and every time you read something about ancient peoples and their beliefs and their everyday life, every book consists of at least 30% explaining and why Marx was totally correct and how everyone got oppressed and how everything was super bad all the time. And it's so weird that even if you look at all these mythological subjects and all this folklore, because like I said, a lot of sources in Russian come from the Soviet era, you really have to sit through a lot of politics in that. It gets political even then. And it's not only here, like some sciences like genetics and computer science, cybernetics, they were also declared a capitalist false sciences because they contradict the Marxist political worldviews. It was just bizarre. So just letting you know that if what I'm telling you sounds like a bit of a mess, it's because, well, the documents are quite a lot of mess.
Yes. So it sounds like a spider web of things, or maybe a few intersecting spider webs. All right, well, let's try to get out of one mess and into another. And that, well, actually, I asked you about Baba Yaga, but are there any other like monsters or legends or werewolves or vampires or something that's sort of uniquely post-Soviet sphere, or not even uniquely, but just that exists that our folks should know about?
Can you hear me now?
Well, it sounds like you're in a submarine, but I can hear you.
Wait, how about now?
Perfect.
Excellent. My microphone wire just popped out. I put it in back.
Okay.
Well, other weird things. Well, it's less in the Russian part of Russia, but if you're talking about post-Soviet sphere, then I'm glad you asked, because Latvia, Lithuania, and Baltics in general, we're prime werewolf country.
Yes.
We have, like, as everyone knows, if you want to talk about vampires, or the strigoi, as they would probably be called, you go to Romania, or the region of Wallachia, to be more specific, or known as Transylvania, where Vlad Dracula was up in arms. But here, specifically in our westernmost regions with the forests, we have werewolves all over the place. Werewolf legends, werewolf stories, someone suspected of being a werewolf. Werewolf is our monster of choice, basically.
Nice.
That's basically all the myths are kind of from this part. Because we were the last pagans of Europe here in the Baltics, technically speaking, because, again, 12th century, later than everyone else. And secondly, this place is super forested. And we have all these forest connections. So, werewolves, all over the place.
What do you have a different word for werewolves, or did we just adopt your word?
Well, we don't call them, we call them vilkachi.
Vilkachi.
Literally wolfman, basically.
Yeah, good, that works.
So, at least as far as I know of, that's a thing that was very popular here. I don't know, it's obviously spread around, and it's mostly in ancient traditions. It's just that we have a super large focus on specifically werewolves. Then we also have foul demons, as every nice little organized or less organized place. One of them being Koshchei the Immortal. He's a kind of a lich, if you know D&D liches. He's more of that thing, except that he's hidden his phylactery, his immortality source, in various sources, various levels of weirdness, where it's hidden in the needle, and which is hidden inside of an egg that's hidden inside of some bird or another, and that bird's flying over the air, and then it's landed in some island, and then there's a chest where that bird lives in, and to get to that island you have to cross a lot of seas, and it's basically Lord Voldemort meets D&D liches. That's Koshchei the Immortal, and he's often working together with Baba Yaga. Sometimes he's her enemy, but he's like the evil male person would be this necromancer lich guy.
So they're frenemies, and his codex, his Da Vinci Code is so complicated that Robert Langdon couldn't solve it without Superman.
I guess it's all about the story of finding all this stuff. Also, we have, weirdly enough, I know that In a lot of Scandinavian culture, you see a lot of elves and trolls. We kind of lack those. We lack the stories of the fair folk, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's because a lot of these stories come from Scandinavia, and they're also popular in the British Isles. But here we don't have a lot of mentions of them. It's kind of interesting. We were introduced to this mythological element by the Teutonic Order and the German part of our culture, where we basically got the gnomes first. And it's funny as a fantasy fan because, you know, the proper term for a gnome and a dwarf in Latvian is the same. So you have to differentiate between these two somehow. Therefore, fantasy works translated in Latvian tend to sound really weird for our ears. Which also kind of makes me wonder. I mean, so a lot of this stuff translated into Latvian sounds really silly, and I don't know. As a native English speaker, does it sound kind of silly to you as well? Like when you speak about Lord of the Rings or something like that? No,
I talk about Lord of the Rings all the time, but I don't really know the difference between a gnome and a dwarf, to tell you the truth. I mean, except the dwarves, you know, are always quarrying and they're sort of greedy, and gnomes seem to be more steely. But aside from that, I don't know what the differences are.
Our first gnomes were like your garden gnome variety, with the hats and everything. That was a bit weird.
So sort of more like a leprechaun, you know.
We did have a Hydra, which is pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
We had a Hydra, and we have our national hero, who was the son of a mayor called Kurbats. He's a guy. In the Russian folklore, these are the three noblemen, three bagateria, which are the three strong. It's your typical strongman archetype, which you get.
You're Hercules. You're Thor.
Sort of, yeah. Then, well, our national kind of larger epic work has introduced to at least Latvia. Our national hero is called Bear Slayer, and he has bear ears, which give him superpowers. That's our version of Captain America. It's called Bear Slayer, and it's everywhere here.
Oh, okay. Not the red dynamo that we saw in Black Widow.
Oh no! Talking about that stuff, I have to tell you that all of you Superman fans out there, Red Sun is the silliest thing I've read in my life. It was just so funny because, for starters, Superman lands in a private farm in the Soviet Union, and everyone goes, "What?" He totally would have landed the kolkhoz in a collective farm or something, I don't know, and confiscated by authorities.
Well, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, Red Sun Superman is a graphic novel, for those of you who don't know. It is a Superman story where what if Superman landed in the Soviet Union instead of in friendly Kent, Kansas farm. So check that out if you're interested. Some people really love the book. It's an easy read. But yeah. Obviously, the folks in the post-Soviet sphere find it to be laughable. So there you go. All right, so you have the Bear Slayer, who's your hero. He's a super strong man with bear ears.
And his main enemy is a Christian knight, the Black Crusader Knight. He fights the evil crusaders sent by the corrupt Pope. Because, well, you know,
subtle.
These are the you know, if your people get launched a crusade against, then when it's time to make villains,
sure,
you know.
Listen, there are longer grudges than 800 years. I mean, in the world of historic grudges, 800 years is basically infancy.
I guess so. Well, we would probably hold up some more, but we didn't really know much about the rest of the planet that well. We had some sailors. We had our own guys who then raided the Swedish people. When the Swedes came back with their loot from Britain, then our guys went to Sweden. Sometimes traded, sometimes raided. Good old Coronians. Fun times with those guys.
Sure.
So, but that was kind of a bizarre thing. And again, the issue here is the fact that it's hard to really separate the myths from kind of the reality, the historical reality here, because again, almost no written sources, and what we have is incomplete. And there are people who, like at least here in the early 1920s, decided to kind of recreate everything from scratch, and it's all a bit of a mess. But well, we kind of adhere to we had a more like cyclical view on nature, I suppose, which is also kind of common with many other like old tribal people. We have this like all the wheel, which is kind of spun around and stuff. It was all interesting. And one thing that still has stayed is like Lithuanian are cousins, basically. We're the only Baltic peoples. Lithuanian language is the oldest language living in Europe. It's super close to old Indo-European thing. It has very few, if any, Latin words, to the point that they don't even call the months of the year by how we're used to. They obviously call them January and February in other languages. However, in pure Lithuanian, they're still called by their ancient names, such as February, I guess, was the month of the bulls, and December is the month of candles, if I remember. We had those archaic names as well, but they still use them. So a lot of this old tribally stuff is still alive in this oral tradition, but it's more about what traditional feast days you celebrate in which part of the year, which is what you eat, and stuff like that. But all the gods and stuff are weird. We just know that there are some still some of these old oak groves which used to hold some spiritual importance, but now they've turned into a place where people who claim to be able to magically charge up rocks to put in your body and heal you from various diseases go and do their thing.
I have two questions for you, and they're probably both a little bit dopey. One is certainly going to be dopey from your perspective. But in Lithuania, do they use 12 months or 13? Because there's really 13 months.
Oh, you mean if you just put them all at 30 days each, right?
Yeah, there's, or 28 if you go by weeks, because, there's actually 13 signs of the zodiac. It's just my sign, Scorpio, which is only up there for 6 or 7 days. Somehow throughout this, it's like Ioculus or something, which is actually there. And one day I'm going to look into the story of that, but there's actually 13. And, if you actually take 28 and then extrapolate over the course of a year, it would be 13 months, and it would be 364 days instead of 365 days. But that's neither here nor there. But I'm guessing from your response, which is more of inquisitive, that they probably use 12 months.
As far as we know of, because, again, all of our sources come from later era, and we have no clue what happened in the pre-Christian contact.
I mean, right now, if you go to Lithuania, do they use
12 months? 12.
Okay.
Definitely, because they have to be adjusted to modern everyday things. The thing is that basically what we know of, where the first written source about these also old Latvian names for the months, which we don't use, Lithuanians still do, we don't, comes from 1649, written by a Germano-Baltic Lutheran pastor, Paul Einhorn, who wrote Historica Latvica. And that's what we kind of have to go through all of this. So yeah, a bit strange. I know that we went into on the moon, which is kind of interesting because unlike other cultures, which is kind of interesting, at least here in the Latvian region, I know in other cultures, sun is mostly masculine and the moon is usually feminine. For us, it's vice versa. For us, sun is the feminine one and the moon is the masculine one, which is also weird, which kind of shows that we probably followed the moon cycles more. We were probably, it's most likely that we used the lunar calendar before we got introduced to the solar one over here. That's just speculation here.
Sure.
But now and then, yeah. And there is some speculation that as Muslim countries do, now and then you add the 13th month now and then. And same with the Jewish one. Maybe, maybe not. Sadly, we just don't know that,
Gotcha.
Which is just weird.
That's fine. Very, very fair answer. Second dopey question. What's the difference between Baltic peoples and Slavic peoples?
Oh, well, see, first of the language, definitely the language. We speak completely different. For one, we use now Latin alphabet, the standard one, in our written form, but our grammar is different. Our words for everything are totally different. because the Slavic peoples, they mostly came from the steppe area, and they're known to be in modern day Ukraine and Bulgaria and all that part. They came from the steppe. Meanwhile, apparently, our people, the Baltic people, all 9 tribes of Latvia has 4 of them. Lithuania has 5. We apparently arrived through the river Daugava, through this whole river section. We arrived by a boat, and we've been living here since forever. And we are Lithuania, like I said, has more in common with ancient Indian language, the Sanskrit, than it does with Latin, because the Roman Empire never went here at all. And Germanic peoples arrived here in 12th century, basically.
So where did the boat come from? Where did the first Baltic boat come from?
Indo-Europeans, all Indo-Europeans. We're our own branch of the Indo-European thing, just the thing.
So gypsies?
We came through India, from India through the Middle East, up through the Black Sea, and then through the rivers, and then we just settled here. We really went out of our way.
Yeah, right. Is that what's called? Is that what's called Turkic people, or is that different? Is that more like from the stands?
No, this is kind of we're not Scandinavian. Now we kind of, it's not Turkic people. Really, well, the closest relative peoples that we can call, well, we of course intermarried with the Slavic peoples as well. So Slavic peoples are culturally our cousins, but genetically we're just our own thing, just like Basque people, kind of, because we're Indo-European, but Baltic peoples are not, you can group Anglo-Saxons and Germans and Scandinavians together as the Germanic tribes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, we're the same group as the Germanic peoples. We're the Baltic peoples. We have been here next to this, on this coast here in Latvia, Lithuania, since, well, ever. As far as we know. We don't know who our other cousins are at all. We know that the Finns and the Estonians and the Hungarians, they are the Turkic peoples. They're Finno-Ugric. They are from the steppes, kind of. How did the Estonians come up here with the Finns? I guess through Russia, maybe. But even though by now we're sort of culturally related to the Slavic peoples, but yeah, we have no clue.
Okay.
We just know that we arrived here through archaeological evidence when the Ice Age kind of went back, and when following the reindeer, basically. We know that when reindeer came to live here in this area when it was still even colder, together with that arrived the first people who would become the Baltic peoples.
You followed your game. You followed your game trails, basically.
Yeah. From where exactly we arrived? Lots of theories, no idea. And it's just a weird thing. There also used to be other Baltic peoples, but now they've all died out. I'm talking about the old third kind of Baltic peoples, which were the old ethnic Prussians. The old Prussians before the Germans came in.
Okay.
Those people were sadly completely eradicated.
So those are not giants or ogres or trolls or anything like that. Just regular people.
Old Prussians?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, they used to be regular people. We have our own weird thing, Belarusians. See, Balts are, well, in Latvian and Lithuanian, that word means white.
Yep.
So we call ourselves the white people, literally. It's just how we call ourselves. That is why when someone tries to do some racist stuff on it, and I'm just telling them, well, are you one of the Baltic peoples? No, you're not. So you know. But yeah, Belarusians are the white Russians because Belarus is sandwiched in between Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Russia. So they're kind of the place where they all mixed. They're either Baltic people who kind of got more Slavic, or Slavic people who got more Baltic, but they're somewhere there. They consider themselves Slavic, although a lot of them consider themselves actually more Lithuanian. So it's a bit of a mess, but that's who they are.
Wow. All right. Well, that's probably a topic for another show, but this is fascinating. But okay, so let's have a little bit of fun. Let's switch gears, sort of, because we've been jumping back and forth a little bit. But I sent you this. I'll just call it a slide, for lack of a better term. And it's entitled "The Day Humans Killed the Reptilians." And it talks about in 856 BC in the region of now Udmurtia, Russia, there was a confrontation between basically Slavic peoples and reptilians, and a very specific number. It's I think it's like, what is it, 800 and something reptilians, and something the Tengri. Tengri
is the name of basically the old religion of Genghis Khan. Their sky god thing. That's called Tengri. It's their old religion.
Right. And then the humans took them on. I guess it was a much larger force, but it's not really specific on that. And do you have any more information on this epic battle between the reptilians? Who are the reptilians? Where did they come from? And what tempted the Slavics to get rid of them?
Well, reptilians are. See, okay. Let me just start with this. Oh boy. Reptilians tie into the Russian theory because, okay now. The reptilian thing in Russia started with a certain name, Svetlana Iumonova, or Iumonova. I don't know how to pronounce her surname correctly.
It's okay. I botch things all the time.
She used to be a former chairman of a political party, Our Will. She ran for office too. She ran in Moscow's 2013 mayoral election. And now we get to the reptilian part, because she's a politician, serious one, running for election. She claimed that reptiles from the fictional planet Nibiru resided in the Zhiguli Mountains in southern Russia. The Zhiguli Mountains in that location, by the way, is where a lot of cars get made. And they resided there after wiping out an ancient Slavic civilization, which is, by the way, the root of all humanity. And she argues that the only reason historians have no knowledge of Russia's core role in human history, this, by the way, this thing about the battle against reptilians is part of her theory, which is just amazing. She argues that although we won the reptiles at the battle, they came back stronger, and cunning reptiles destroyed all traces of the first proto-civilization known to man, which is in Russia, under these mountains. And they are still out there, and they're plotting the end of the human race. And she warned everyone, though she graciously offers salvation to those paying a fee to her. Because she refers to herself as the messenger of the sun, and she's also a leader of a reptilian overlord fiend cult in the Samara region.
Where's Samara?
And Samara is kind of the central southern Russia. Kind of near those mountains. And recently, because Orthodox Church still holds power, and Putin doesn't like that stuff a lot, because there are quite a lot of rumors that Putin is actually extremely superstitious, by the way. He recently, for example, arrested a shaman from Vladivostok, Far East, who had decided that that Putin is obsessed with angry spirits, and that he would go to Moscow and exorcise Putin with his shamanistic magic. And he just started walking. It took him, everyone decided that, it'll take him 2 years. And people got super excited about this because, hey, well, it's funny, but, well, what if he succeeds? You never know. We have to deal with our problems somehow. And he sent, Russian Spetsnaz to arrest him and forcibly put him in a psychiatric ward, which is sad. The same thing happened to this Iumonova lady, who got her headquarters raided by Russian special forces, who scaled the 3-meter barbed wire fence that's about 9 feet. She had a 9 feet high barbed wire fence surrounding the compound, and they also shot her guard dogs. She at that point was absent, and she still remains in the police's wanted list. This is kind of weird, because when you're talking reptilian overlords, craziness, this is all totally awesome. We also have very weird cults with their own compounds still. And we have Vissarion, guy who obviously claims to be the second coming of Jesus, as you do. I mean, you can't be a proper cult without that.
Sure. What's his name?
Vissarion.
Vissarion. That sounds like an evil villain's name.
He's actually a pretty chill guy. I think that Vice actually made a documentary about him, and you can find it there. And it's in English. It's one of the few things about Russia that I know for sure that exists in English.
I can check that out.
That's the reptilian thing. And this also ties into, all this lost stuff about these old reptilians and their power. also ties into the lost time theory, which claims that all of the history that was written from Charlemagne up to the 17th century never existed. It's all an invention by the evil capitalists to downplay the mighty role of Russia. As Russia has its own thing. They had you call him Ivan the Terrible. In Russia, he's known as Ivan Grozny or Ivan the Stormlight. Awe-inspiring, awesome.
Yes,
it's awesome both in the fact that you were afraid of him as the storm, and also in the sense that he's big guy. He is claimed to have a massive library of arcane texts and knowledge, which is now lost because evil Catholics arrived with his diplomatic things and stole all of it and hid it away, so that no one would learn of the ancient mega Russian civilization, who was super advanced. It's their own version of basically Atlantis. And this ties into weird kurgans, those the burial hills, and it's kind of Russia's version of Gobekli Tepe. And a lot of this mysticism comes from Nikolai Rerik, who's basically the father of Russian esotericism, modern-day esotericism. He lived in the 19th century. He was a poet and a painter, and he spent a lot of time in Nepal and in northern India, basically searching for Shambhala and doing a lot of Buddhist meditation. So that got tied into the mess as well. And one of the more interesting Russian adherents of Nikolai Rerik and his kind of pseudo-Buddhist teachings mixed together with paganistic beliefs was none other than Ungern, the Mad Baron of Mongolia. The white, I made an episode about him because he was a totally crazy guy who declared himself to be the restorer of Genghis Khan's empire and reincarnation of Buddha. He was also a massive evil terrorist and a mad dictator who was with the royalist forces in the Russian Civil War.
The total package.
Yeah, it's insane. We also had some Soviet generals who believed in old Perun and all these pagan gods for a while as well, as they joined the Communist Party. It's just weird. I think I mentioned this in my Tukhachevsky tank episode. That guy was also weird. So mysticism and all these weird conspiracy theories, they are a massive thing there. And it's kind of weird because currently, and again, I'm going to be a bit political here, a lot of people buy into these theories because in Russia, all the media, state media, the big ones, the TVs, which people actually watch and like the larger newspapers, they're very much self-censored and state-run. Sure. All the NTVs, everything. And they often, and if you use the internet and you do some research, you often understand how much of all of that is disinformation and outright lies often. And this combines with the fact that no one trusts the news, and when some scientist does do something, then they also people are very skeptical towards all this. And they are quite superstitious, which is surprising, but in one way, but on the other, all this also comes down to, because the generation that, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they're still alive there. They're about your age and older too. But the Soviet Union, again, was fully atheistic, fully materialistic state. And they basically denied all such paranormal stuff completely. At least on paper they did, because again, the party leaders sometimes had their own private shamans, and they had their own CIA experiments style thing, except it was in literal volcano. Our Area 51 was in a volcano, which is also funny. And we had our own Project Orange and all that good stuff. But a lot of people turn to various super weird forms of mysticism when, and old legends and all these theories when the Soviet Union collapsed, because, it was prohibited. And we had, guys who could supercharge your drinking water to make it super effective and heal everything, because they channeled ancient energies of ancient Russian people and old gods. And people put them in front of their TVs to supercharge them.
Basically like Vril that could be transmitted through water and radio waves?
Yeah, and now the guy does that via YouTube. You can put on his YouTube videos and charge your jar of water and then drink it.
Oh, very nice.
It's a weird combination of orthodoxy, which is super strong and going, because Russia is a very religious country. Extremely religious.
I can tell you one thing: the cults, especially ones that have some religious basis, they're very flexible. Once you've bought in pivots, logical divergences. None of it matters. It's if you bought in, maybe you lose handfuls, but your crux, your core, your faithful, they'll go with whatever pivot and change you go with.
Yeah, and like Russia has this element of very strong, very strong kind of very strong feelings of this era. And besides, critical reasoning isn't that much taught in schools, universities, and the whole system of studying is a bit different. And modern day Russian politicians and people in the kind of the people who are responsible for all the education, they're saying that the quality of education is kind of also going down because there's a lot of, like I call it, magical space crystals that heal anything. We actually don't have giant stories, which is weird because I've read a lot about I like my good old Ancient Alien show, and one of my hobbies, by the way, is I like to watch YouTube videos where someone claims they spotted a UFO and when they caught something on camera. I want to believe, huge X-Files fan, and I want to see something someday, at least some explanations, and I'm really happy that Harvard University is now doing UFO research. But I want to take a look at this. It's kind of interesting, but someone sees something that cannot be explained. It's fun. But I've noticed that specifically there's old Nephilim in the Bible. There's all these stories. We rarely had any ancient race of giants because it's cold and foresty and not that we know. It's
no room for giants. No room for giants there. Well, that's a bit of a shame, but you have plenty of stuff to offer, and one of them is I shared with you, and I found it on Ancient Origins, and it's called, I'm going to pronounce Archaim, Arkaim, and apparently it is like Russian Stonehenge and Russian Atlantis all built into one. I don't know. I guess it ties into the Aryans and the Anunnaki, which I guess also ties into reptilians. But I'm not sure about the post-Soviet sphere view on these things.
Archon is an interesting thing. If you look at the map, you can see that it's, I swear, southern regions of Russia on the border of Kazakhstan, near the city of Samara, by the way. It's between Chelyabinsk, Ufa, and Samara. Quite interesting. It's kind of if you think about the Caucasus Mountains and just draw a line straight to the right, it's right there when that line would hit Kazakhstan.
Gotcha.
It's around that place. There have been, and that's basically an old burial ground. It had a lot of these kurgans,
mounds.
These mounds, I suppose, these things in the. And also, interestingly enough,
because when we hear Kurgan, we think of the villain from the Highlander movie.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry.
No. I mean, I think that's where they took the name from because he was basically a giant. So I'm sure they took it from the Kurgans. There was also a pro wrestler called Kurgan. He's actually a working actor now under his real name. But these things are not important at the moment.
No, it's really funny because. Highlander movies were awesome. The first one, that is. I like the series. The second movie was lovable.
Yeah, no, I agree. The first movie was the only one that needs to be watched, and that's the one with the Kurgan, and I think, what's his name? Clancy Brown played the Kurgan. But anyway, we're both digressing. Now it's your fault, too.
Okay, but talking about why I mentioned the cities around it. If you remember, the Zhiguli Mountains, also southern Russia, nearby that place. Samara was the location of our previously mentioned reptilian colony, right? Chelyabinsk, however, is an interesting city with some rich history, but recently, one of the conspiracy theories was, I think it was 2019, when the meteorite fell in Chelyabinsk, if you remember. And a lot of people have speculated that in the conspiracy theory sense, because we know it exists there, this whole burial mound stuff, and archaeological digs have happened there. But a lot of people speculate that there's a hidden magnetic field, which ties in with the reptilian theory, that there are hidden reptilian overlords running on the whole show, and that the meteorite fell in Chelyabinsk because somehow the magnetic underground energies are waking up under this archive city. Sort of city. And it's just kind of bizarre that way. Because we have the huge history. There's something with ley lines, because ley line thing, dowsing water dowsing, which is tied to these ley lines, it's also a big huge thing, at least in our and in all the old mythologies. And I guess the most famous guy from our part of the world that went to America, Florida specifically, is Ed Lietskalnish. Edward, the guy who built the Coral Castle. Nice little dude. Claimed that he had found out the secret powers of that. Also a Freemason. Also, he used to be a Freemason and, a revolutionary anarchist. Fun dude.
It's amazing how many people say they used to be Freemasons.
I don't know. It's kind of weird. He also was a revolutionary in 1905. But yeah, see, this whole thing, again, it ties into this ancient civilization stuff, because they claim to be the spiritual center of it. Also, it's the whole city. A lot of people claim that it's on the 40th parallel, same as Stonehenge, and it's located north of the Caspian Sea, like north of the Aral Sea as well, which is kind of an old trade region. Shame that the Aral Sea has basically dried out now, which is going to be fun. But about the Aryan stuff, yeah, there's a lot of Indo-European, very Indian symbols, including classical swastikas, which Hitler took in. That's why you compare it to the Aryans, because, Hitler took something old and historical and something with actually a beautiful meaning and then turned it bad, and now you can't use it.
Yeah, I learned last week, and I'm not sure if it's correct or not, but I'm going to assume that person was correct, that he actually reversed the direction. He made it from clockwise to counterclockwise.
Yeah, and that's interesting because we have the same symbols in our old traditional Latvian, that is, all these things, because, when the Scandinavians, they made the runes, we made various belts with, woven belts with all these symbolism in. And according to Latvian and Slavic ancient mythology, if you turn the swastika all the way around, then it loses its original meaning, then it kind of becomes a symbol for, the wrongness of nature. If it's not rotated in the standard way, then it symbolizes the wheel of life and this whole fire and rebirth and all the good stuff. If you turn it around, then you're basically messing with the spiritual beliefs, and it kind of symbolizes when everything goes awry, when zombies appear and start coming out from their graves. It's kind of more like associated with the rot and dirtiness. So why would he do that? I don't know, but it's considered the way Hitler used it was considered an evil way, even in paganistic cultures. But yeah, we have a bunch of all of these old, on this place, we have old kind of stones, very strange stones that are kind of gravestones, but not really. And they're kind of similar to the old stones found in the Balkans. Just, you can find them all over the Balkans, specifically in Bosnia and in Serbia. These, I forgot their correct name in English, but there are these white stones with figures on them, which we know for certain are not gravestones. And something similar is also in this archive location. The problem is that, again, there's a lot of underfunding going on. We don't know exactly what's happening there. There's a lot of groups that travel there for their religious stuff, but so far we don't really know all this thing. A lot of idea is the fact that this is, again, southern Ural Mountains, and a lot of people tie this in with early Zoroastrianism as well, but I doubt this theory, because some people really think that this southern Urals was actually the birthplace of the Indo-Iranian people, the original Aryan people, which is why you might find swastikas there. But it's still a bit weird, and again, in modern day era, it's all about all these kind of reptilians and all that stuff. It's just weird. But you know what? I have to mention there, if you think about it logically, right, from logical perspective, if reptilians were real, then they would be competent at something. I mean, if they exist, then they are hidden, they're hidden, and no one knows they exist except David Icke. All power to David Icke, obviously. And they're competent at being hidden, running a conspiracy, and being efficient at their jobs. I mean, why not just make their own party? I'd vote for them. They're competent at something, at least, I mean, hey, I can be sure that they're good at some jobs, so might be reptilians running. Have you really thought about maybe reptilian overlords is what we need these days,
I think about these things way too much. And I can tell you what the devotees believe. They believe that the reptilians are directly tied to the forces of the Antichrist. And if they take control it's because they're going to fool us into thinking that they're doing something good. And so we're going to buy into it thinking that we're doing the work of Christ, but we're actually doing the work of the Antichrist and that's where the socialism fear comes into it. So the reptilians are actually the soldiers or the forces of the Antichrist that we would be ushering in. So that's the root of the argument, at least in sort of evangelical world. But it's unlikely that a movement that's less than 200 years old in the United States invented this. So it's probably the same root pretty much everywhere.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about all these conspiracy theories because, like I said, I looked into the Russian forums for this situation, for this stuff. I tried to make sense of all of this, but in the same vein as people discuss reptilians, there's another great thing. For one, there are a bunch of people in Russia who consider the fact that Alaska should be returned to Russia. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure everyone who lives in Alaska totally would like to be back in Russian fold. The same people also firmly believe that the United States unfairly stole unfairly stole Alaska from Mother Russia.
Sure.
Which is just kind of interesting. Then there are the people who literally equate everything American with the Antichrist itself. There's a bunch of theories, serious theories on the internet, because, this might sound a bit crazy, but look, over here in these parts, we call roller coasters the American mountains. That's their default name. Or American hills. I didn't even know they weren't called that in America until someone told me. And I was like, wait, what? Because when I visited, I think first time I went, I was like, okay, what's actually kind of the proper default name for your American mountains? And it was like everyone went like, what? So then I had to actually explain what they were because one of those weird names. Other weird name that we have is a bit more prophetic is the fact that we call the silver duct tape. That's called the MacGyver here.
Well, that makes sense.
It arrived at the same time as the MacGyver show, so everyone just calls it MacGyver. Or MacGyver or MacGyver. Just related to that. Same as every truck is a Jeep. Official term for a truck is a Jeep.
That's okay too. That's all right. That's fine.
American mountains, specifically those in Disney World, I think, because that was on the show. There's a YouTube video which explains that the guy who built those things built it in such a way that it draws a satanic pattern in the air, and thus everyone who rides them is actually performing a ritual that will serve Walt Disney in hell, no less, and will bring great sacrifices to Lucifer. And they basically, if you ride on those things in Disney World, then you basically have forfeited your soul. Thus, no real Orthodox believer should ever go and use them, because and the replicas of those are always evil and with the same spiritual intent.
Okay, well, you heard it. Everyone go to Universal, I guess.
I have never been to any Disney place, and I've never ridden a roller coaster in my life because we don't have them in Latvia. Like none of them.
Oh.
I'm 31. It's still kind of one of my dreams, which I've had since a kid. I really want to go to one of the big ones. The ones you see in the movies. It was my dream, ever. But the times I visited the States, they're always super expensive and far away. And
you know what? You come, I'll treat to a roller coaster. It'd be my pleasure. I'll get you a day pass, and you can go on the roller coaster and enjoy your childhood dream. If it'll be my little version of a Make-A-Wish, so that'll be me. That's the best. That's the least I can do for this.
Oh well, thank you. I know it sounds kind of silly to everyone. I'm speaking about historical stuff and all this, but yeah, I've never been in roller coasters. Just things that we don't have here.
Well, a little true story about me, and this is, and I'm going to be detail sparse. But when I was a kid, I was paired with a Russian, kid who I'm not sure what country he lived in because it was the Soviet Union, and so I was paired in some ceremony, meaning me doing it was the equivalent spiritually of him doing it in his country. Now, at some point, some years later, his family was able to get a tourist visa somehow, to come to the United States, and he stayed in my house for, I don't know, 4 days, 5 days. I couldn't tell you what he looks like. I don't remember anything about him whatsoever, except that, like, any blue jeans I had, like ones that didn't fit me, even whatever it was, rips, he wanted them. And I remember that nothing was more valuable than, like, cassette tapes of, like, Def Leppard and AC/DC and Iron Maiden. So excited about the new ones, but even more excited that he could make mixtapes off the radio. I mean, that this is the 80s. So, you know, we didn't have CDs, and then you know, waited for songs. But he didn't care about which songs. All of them were awesome. If it was heavy metal or hard rock, which is different than heavy metal now, really, he wanted. He was so excited. I guess it was a black market, or like he'd be like the coolest kid in his school, or whatever it was.
Whoa.
Yeah, right. And I remember that his last name, this I do remember, was Bialy, which I always thought, because Bialy, I'm sure it's spelled differently, but Bialy is like a flat bagel, and I'm from New York originally, so, you know, bagels are like, you know, bagels and pizza are, you know, are yin and yang. So I always, you know, equated him with like a flat oniony bagel. But anyway, that's my. So obviously, I have a history of doing great things for people from the Soviet sphere. So there you go.
Let me comment on this one, because you touched on. I can tell you exactly what he did with all the mixtapes and all the jeans. One, he really was the coolest guy at school, 100%.
Excellent.
Number two, a pair of jeans would cost in the black market more than it was about like 2 months' salary of an engineer for a single pair of jeans. They were ridiculously expensive. They cost about 200 rubles at the time, where if you were an engineer in a company, or like a high professional or a doctor, you get 120 rubles as your salary. The jeans would cost you 200 rubles.
And these were like Lee and Wrangler jeans, which are not really
all better.
Yeah, not really high-end jeans even then. And well, he really made out. His family really made out, because this trip was paid for by some, you know, not-for-profit, for some tax exempt. I don't remember what the program was. I'm not even sure anyone told me, because I'm 15 or 16 years old. Why are they going to tell me anything? Except, you know, make your room clean, because you're going to have a roommate for 5 days. Yeah, so that was pretty cool, and then that was fun. So so basically he got laid before me because of my shitty stuff. So good for you, Mr. Bialy.
Music, by the way, also important, because, you know, if you look at the countercultures of the day, when you look at, say, the good old hard rock guys when it became popular, or before that, all the hippie movement in Soviet Russia, that everyone was saying that this is the evil capitalist influence. Although I know that in the US, a lot of people thought it was evil Soviet influence, evil socialist. Meanwhile, it was evil capitalist back in the USSR. And all these mixtapes, they were super important, because all this music was basically illegal. You couldn't get all those songs. And people went so far as to try to pirate it, because radio stations also controlled. And people would literally steal old X-ray images from hospital bins and just imprint like vinyls on them, because they were, you know, you could roll them up. It was called the bones, and it was basically kind of alternative to samizdat, where samizdat was for books, you know, your homemade little publishing things. You had this samizdat for music, and when the tapes arrived, oh boy, they were big. They were definitely copied, and if you could get your hands on something, it's super important. Like you definitely saved that guy up, and he. You made him and his family, when they got back, super happy, because, you know, I presume that if they visited the United States, then they obviously were vetted after the trip by nice little guys from KGB, and to get off easier, they obviously gave the jeans and mixtapes as bribes to them. Definitely, I can 100% say that this is what happened.
I always had a feeling that was probably the case, but we're going to move away from my heroism and go to my favorite topic, which is the Anunnaki. And you told me, much to my surprise, that you have Anunnaki in the post-Soviet sphere.
Well, all the ancient alien stuff, basically.
Yep.
Sort of ish. Yeah, we have a lot of belief in that thing. Again, more so in Russia, but that's a thing. And it was very popular here, because my grandfather, who's deceased now, he was a civil engineer during Soviet. He also was well-traveled, and he's responsible for building our first asphalt factory. But at one point, there was a newspaper called Mystical Sensation, printed on really bad paper. And there were also all these translations from Erik von Däniken, the original guy.
Yeah.
And his supporters, yeah. But when
I'm in the middle of reading one of his third books.
See, his books appeared over here in the late 90s, you see. And people didn't have the internet. So a lot of people read them and were super surprised about everything there. And that's where everything started. We had our own fair share of various cults built around them. We had our own version of Heaven's Gate, obviously. Well, why not?
Sure, why not?
But at that point, might as well. But the tricky part is that everyone, after these books came out, that's how this archive basically started and all this stuff, the mystical part of it. Everyone started looking for every possibly human way how we tied into this. Because, this place has a rich pagan history. We still hold on to these traditions. We have this strong feeling of our old pre-Christian era times. We still have, our biggest festival in Latvia is our Midsummer's Night, which we call Ligo, which is a fertility festival, which is kind of like an importance, I think. It's as important as Thanksgiving for you guys, except our version of it involves having a lot of sex, jumping over massive bonfires, eating a lot of cheese, and drinking a lot of beer. It's a thing.
Sure.
And everyone started looking for all sorts of ties in those ancient documents, which would tie into Anunnaki theory. That is why I mentioned the old oak groves and sacred places of the paganism at the beginning, because that's a prime spot. We have it's called Puokaini. It's kind of a part of a forest, and that's where everyone goes and looks at our old mounds and everything. And then people started looking at all sorts of things, like the famous 1904 Tunguska explosion. The one where meteorites kind of entered and then exploded there.
Sure.
And people are thinking that it was kind of an ancient alien spacecraft returning back to Earth.
Sure. Nothing like a good meteorite strike to, usher in Ragnarok or some sort of alien invasion or be some, doomsday cult inspiration.
The really craziest thing that goes together well with a lot of Russian supremacism, which is a thing, is the fact that Slavic peoples are actually the chosen race to rule this planet Earth, because they are not just pure humans, they're also kind of interbred and related to these Anunnaki. They were specifically created by them to be this mega ruling race. And thus, the Russia is so big, because the Russia is also failing, because technically Russia should take over all the planet Earth. And then we would get one world government with, I guess Vladimir Putin's still ruling after, a couple of 100 years. I think he'll figure out a way. He'll figure out a way too.
So it's failing because it's not big enough.
Yeah, obviously. We should be bigger. Absolutely. But...
And the whole country or at least the power centers are... Nephilim or half human, half alien DNA in it.
Yeah, people talk a lot about that. But again, we're just scratching the surface with the weirdest conspiracy theories. A lot of them also involve the contact that apparently the theory that the KGB had unearthed some materials which stated about the ancient aliens, and then they used it for Soviet power, which then spiritually boosted the Soviet party leaders or whatever, and then they kind of hid it from public eye. It was weird, because every time you hear Anunnaki or conspiracy theories, there will be some KGB there.
Mm.
Because, again, every time, KGB here was the internal police part, but they also did some spying. They were kind of, at the same time, the FBI and the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second largest intelligence agency was specifically military, which was the GRU.
Right.
And they competed with each other. It's crazy. But the KGB always had its own special secrets. They always had their own things. And even today, I don't know how that works in the United States here, because you might have something similar.
We do.
But even today, Russia has...
That's why we have a director of national intelligence who's supposed to sort of coordinate that and cull out what comes from the competition and work it out. But yeah, we humans are humans. We have the same. We have a similar. I mean, I don't know about the scope.
The different pattern here is that in Russia, even today, the army and the government run secret cities, hidden, closed cities, so to speak. Basically, if there's a military factory that, that serves Russia's nuclear weapons, they have a city where all the staff lives, and they have to sign non-disclosure agreements, and often those people, basically, they arrive in that city, and they'll just basically never leave. They'll still live there forever. Like Russian space program, Korolev, even the Soviet era, he lived in such a city. A lot of these cities aren't on the maps even. Baikonur Cosmodrome isn't in Baikonur, by the way. It's another hidden, closed thing. They all have names with code name and lettering afterward. They have Kstishin 17, I think, which is literally a hidden city where everything's prepared, where Mr. Putin will take a train from Moscow, his underground secret layer of Moscow Metro, because that was built specifically for Stalin and everything else, which will take him in the case of nuclear attack on Moscow to his second Kremlin specifically built one.
So, did you ever see the movie Tenet?
Yes, I did. I can't say I understood it perfectly, though.
No, nobody did. But that was part of the bad guy. The rich man's story was that he was in one of those secret cities and he survived some sort of nuclear accident and made his fortune, trading on nuclear materials in one of these secret cities. So that was based on some truth.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rumors about these hidden cities and their purpose and everything. And there's always this thing about the really weird hidden stuff. And there's also a lot of things in like the Russian government, everything that's still top secret even after 50, 75 years. Like everyone heard of Novichok these days. Well, that was built in one of those secret cities. And the weirdest part is, again, if we speak about the Aral Sea, that's another place of one of these secret bioweapons labs, which is built in the middle of a sea on a large island. However, the sea is now dried up because of other Soviet projects. And now it's a land full of anthrax. And there's a lot of other things. And all these conspiracy theories involve, like, you have Area 51, we have these hidden cities, which, like I said, still exist today. And no one talks about what's going on with them at all. So,
wow. Well, I guess it puts certain things in perspective.
Some claim Anunnaki still live in such hidden cities, which aren't on the maps. So,
And you actually use the word Anunnaki?
Well, that's the easiest one. Because ancient aliens really sound bad in Russian.
What's the Russian?
Инопланетяне is just weird.
What's the word? I'm sorry.
Древние инопланетяне. Инопланетяне.
Is that the same word? So Anunnaki would be whatever you just said?
We just say Anunnaki. Древние инопланетяне is literally ancient aliens. Древний is ancient, инопланетян, or literally someone from another planet is an alien.
Yeah, I heard the planet root in there somewhere. So, okay, cool. So you use the word Anunnaki. I think that is really awesome. Any idea how long the word Anunnaki has been used in Russian post-Soviet sphere, pre-Soviet sphere?
Well, previously it was, again, I don't know exactly. However, when it comes to conspiracy theories, we just scratched the weird ones. Then there were ones specifically built previously by the Tsarist government and then by the Soviet government. For example, one of the more famous hoaxes in world history, remember the nice little book about the Elders of Zion, the Hidden Protocols?
Sure, of course.
Yeah, that book was written by the Tsarist secret police, Ochranka, as a means to kind of spread out rumors in the Russian higher society to justify pogroms and why should you take more taxes from the Jewish people? Internal use that got out, which is fun. So I'm pretty sure that if I would dig deep in that part of Russian history, I'd definitely find something. I know that this word Anunnaki itself, Nikolai Rerik definitely mentioned this because, again, it also ties into Shambhala theories. Look, conspirology is a huge field with various different types of everything. And then we have our own Dyatlov past and everything, and secret KGB weapons. So, hey, who knows? I really have to study this further, definitely.
That's fine because I'm booking you again anyway. I don't know when, and we're going to talk about pop culture and how it's interpreted and how it makes its way into your country. But maybe we can, or not your country, but your part of the world, including your country. But we can also do sort of part 2 on this. It's funny because Anunnaki is most tied with Babylonian, Sumerian, sort of a flood, pre-flood Gilgamesh kind of mythology, but it's also in Indian.
But it makes sense. Again, but we're talking about archive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, theory that's the root, the birthplace of these Indo-Iranian people, of the people who became Zoroastrian and lived in these areas, right?
Sure.
If you think about it. It's also, look, it goes deep. I mean, you can't really make a proper conspiracy theory unless you go all into it. But
sure.
It's kind of weird to even take a look at how these whole things, how people develop these things and how they go around them.
And if you're Anunnaki, if you're reptilians or Anunnaki and you want to take over a world or seed a world, panspermia or otherwise, why would you have only one location? You'd land someplace, maybe Archime, and then you would go out. You would go to Mu. You would go to Atlantis. You would form the Hopi in North America. You'd visit the Egyptians. Anything fits. Wherever there's an old circle, Stonehenge or Göbekli Tepe, they could have expanded. But if we want to call the origin site being arcane, but I'm okay with that. That's fine until somebody proves it wrong. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I'm personally speaking to overlords. I am firmly in the camp of robots 2030.
Robots.
Skynet's my guy.
Yeah, the singularity will be all. Well, I had a guest on who didn't exactly get to that, but he believes that Satan is in technology, is in the cyber, it's the cyber Satan, that the internet and all that is exposing, again, marshaling these forces of the Antichrist to us through technology, which, hey, the singularity. Yeah.
I'm gonna do something unspeakably evil, but you understand why I'm pro singularity after you Google this one up. Google up Rocco's Basilisk. You'll thank me later.
Rocco's Basilisk. Okay.
Yeah, I have now just doomed you forever.
Well, I did that to myself long ago. How do you spell Rocco's Basilisk?
R-O-K-O? Rocco's Basilisk. Rocco is a person. Rocco's Basilisk is his thought experiment, which is interesting. It's a very, very fun thing to think about.
Like Basilisk, the monster, the chimera?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rocco's Basilisk, except when it relates to AIs and computers and singularity. You go do your own research on that one. I don't want to take full responsibility.
Okay. I'll give you credit. Don't worry. But listen, you think you're going to get rid of me, but no, I'm going to be like some sort of pesky, friend you didn't know you wanted to get rid of kind of thing. But anyway, I thank you so much for your time. We have done a long show, but I think it's been very worthwhile. And there'll definitely be at least a part 2. Plug your show. Plug your stuff.
Well, like I said, I did at the beginning. Please come give us a listen at the Eastern Border. We're going to do some weird theory stuff soon because I want to explain the main differences between old Soviet socialism and modern socialism, because a lot of people think they kind of overlap where they really don't, and I think those two peoples would really hate each other. So I want to do kind of a philosophical take on that one. But we're going on with our weird Soviet technology series eventually, because we're going to have a literally chemist whose hobby is rocketry. We're going to have a conversation about all the rocket programs and all the secret military stuff. And then I have to take a look at the recent events too. So, Eastern Border, everywhere. Please have a listen at my show. It's a bit, tends to get dark. So if it gets too dark, like in my animal episode, oh boy, that went downhill really fast. But then I give you a nice little friendly warning at the beginning, because I know a lot of people actually like listening to my show with their kids. But yeah, come check out the Eastern Border everywhere where you find podcasts and stuff. And it's going to be great.
Yep.
And it was really fun and nice to have you here. If you ever decide to visit Latvia, of course, we'll take you around on tour. We'll show you everything. We will take you to the old KGB torture house museum stuff. would be fun.
Yeah, that actually sounds like a great vacation for me, though I'm not sure that my girlfriend La Sicaria wants to do that. But and if you ever get here, like I said, roller coaster, entrance to the park, day pass on me. Fried bananas or chocolate dipped bananas, that's on you. But I'm good for at least some fried.
You guys eat fried bananas?
Oh, we eat everything. There's fried bananas. There's chocolate dipped frozen bananas. You name it, we got it. This is anything that can make you fat and kill you. We have.
I do have to say though, before I go, I visited the United States a couple of times. I've been to Texas, to Washington, to New York, to Boston. I like Boston the most. Boston just felt very, very homely because most of the European stuff. But I do have to give you credit. You guys have way better burgers than we have over here. Like, we also have McDonald's and KFC, and for a weird reason, Circle K as our gas stations. It's the biggest gas station chain in Latvia. I don't know how, but they just bought over the Swedish chain. But yeah, the burgers you have in the United States, second to none. I miss those the most. Was just awesome.
we have better burgers than the burger chain. So you know what? A burger's on me also. I imagine the Circle K jumped in when the guy from Lukos got out of favor with Mr. Putin.
Probably. But previously those were like stop 12 things. Kind of weird. Really kind of weird. Oh, over here, by the way, corn syrup is illegal in Latvia, so everything has real sugar in it.
Ah, well, that sounds great. I mean, everybody loves what we call Mexican Coke because that's the closest country where you can get the old Coke with the sugar, not the cocaine. But yeah, it's delicious. So cool. All right, well, that's an incentive. I always did want to take one of those Viking ship tours through the rivers into Central Europe and go into all like the Black Sea ports and all the different ports, south of Budapest and Prague and go on up, and Philpot, where Jason found the fleece and what's now Georgia. So people don't know that. They think it was just like in Greece or went to Turkey. No, he had to go pretty far out. So the world was semi-small even then, which gets into your arcane theory that perhaps that is the origin spot of the Anunnaki and maybe is the first Atlantis.
I just read on all of that, but like my biggest hit on how small the world was the sheer fact that ancient China and ancient Rome actually traded and knew about each other, and that strikes me as awesome. I mean. And one thing why I personally don't like ancient alien theories at all is the fact that you always have to look for explanations of how pyramids were built or something was built. And I think that's disrespecting the ancient people because they weren't dumb and they had limited information and limited tools. But look what they did. And I think attributing ancient achievements to some aliens it's kind of wrong. You have to give respect to that ancient Egyptian engineer really did his best and built the pyramid. So yeah. That's my thing.
I say it's a false choice. You can have both. I mean, because there's thousands of years, depending on when you think the aliens first came or their number of visits, there could be millennia between those things. So it's all good. I can make it all work. I'm happy enough to make it work. That's the beauty of believing in nothing is you can believe in everything.
Oh, one thing though, as it's almost 10:30 p.m., I can tell you. From the future, I can inform you that at least in the next 7 hours, the world will not end. So that's good.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Well, I can speak to someone from Australia so they can confirm that in the past it hasn't either. So that's good. We have everything covered. And in the present, we're good as well. Chris, thank you so much. You're a ton of fun. You're a fount of information. We're going to be in touch. We're going to do other shows. I don't know. Again, thank you. Thanks for plugging your stuff. Welcome to the garden. You're welcome back anytime you like.
Thank you for having me. And as I said at the end of every episode, до свидания, товарищи.
До свидания. Pause.
jumti līgo, līgo, izskaptēmis pāras celtas līgo, līgo, izskaptēmis pāras celtas līgo, ādatām inosadurti līgo, līgo, izskaptēmi nosagriezti līgo, līgo, izskaptēmi nosagriezti